please join me in welcoming Hugging Face co-founder and CEO Clém Delangue. Hi, Clém. Well, Clém, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. You came all the way from Miami, and we brought the San Francisco-Miami weather for you.
Yes, that's perfect.
I want to keep my introduction short so you can speak in your own words about your company. Can you tell us a little bit about Hugging Face, which, as I said, I think is one of the most important AI startups around right now? I think most AI developers are very familiar with your platform, and there's a lot of pride in being a big name on the Hugging Face platform if you're an AI coder. But I'd love to start us off by just having you tell us a little bit, what is Hugging Face, what does it do, and also how in the world did you land on the name Hugging Face?
Yes, most of our success is coming actually from our name, from our Hugging Face name and logo. We've been lucky to become the most used platform for AI builders. We have over 4 million AI builders now using the Hugging Face platform, who collectively have shared over 1 million AI models, 300,000 data sets, and collectively have built over 300,000 apps. It's a way for them to collaborate and build AI themselves instead of kind of like outsourcing AI building to others.
And how did you personally get interested in AI and come up with the idea for starting Hugging Face?
So I was lucky to join an AI startup. We weren't calling it AI at the time, now 15 years ago, so before all the craziness in AI. And we were doing computer vision at the time, image recognition. And when I tried the first demo, I was kind of like blown away. I was like, okay, this is a technology that allows you to do things that were never possible before. So I got completely obsessed with it. Worked at a bunch of startups after that. And now 7 years ago, with my co-founders, we gathered around this idea of building AI together. We started with something completely different. At the beginning, we were doing Tamagotchi AI for actually over 3 years, if you can believe that. And then progressively
What do you mean by Tamagotchi AI? Is that like the Tamagotchi rabbit kind of devices that we have now? Or
kind of. At the time, the leading kind of like AI products were Siri and Alexa, right? These kind of like assistants. And we were thinking that they were kind of boring, right? They were mostly kind of like telling you the weather or helping you with productivity stuff. So we wanted to build something a bit similar, but for fun, for entertainment, for companionship. And so we had these apps on Messenger, on the App Store, basically to have your own version of Siri, Alexa, or ChatGPT today, but for entertainment.
Great. And then how did you decide to shift to being this platform for developers, and why is open source such an important part of your ethos?
It was very organic, powered by the community. We started to release some of the underlying kind of like things that we were working on. At the time, the way we were doing chatbots was by aggregating a lot of different models for different tasks. Like, for example, you have a text, you can extract information, you can summarize the text, you can generate the answer. And because we wanted the chatbot to be able to talk about a lot of different topics, we needed to aggregate a lot of different data sets, right? Sports data sets, entertainment data sets. And so we had this kind of like underlying platform that was working well for many models, many data sets. And when we started to release that publicly in open source, the community kind of like rallied around that, right? Like the researchers from all the biggest labs started to use Hugging Face to share their models. That's what led to kind of like most of the most popular open models that you know to be released on Hugging Face, like Llama, that everyone has heard about, Stable Diffusion, and the million models that are now uploaded on Hugging Face.
So does it cost money for developers to upload?
No, it's free. Content? So most of the platform is free. And then we have premium features and premium infrastructure, especially when big enterprises are using us, which help us fund the free and open source part of the platform. We're lucky to be close to profitable these days, which is pretty unusual for AI startups. Most of them are more on the opposite side of the spectrum and burning tons of VC money. But it's very important for us to be sustainable as a company because we're building a platform for the community. So we want to make sure that we're going to be around for the next 10 years, 20 years, 50 years. And so we put a lot of focus on making sure we build not only a thriving business, but a sustainable business.
Bloomberg reported on your last funding round. Any updates on the revenue or customers that you can share with us?
So we have over 10,000 paying customers now. We have around 100,000 organizations total that are using us. It's going really, really well, especially with something called the Enterprise Hub, which most of the really serious companies in AI are now using internally as a way to kind of like empower them to really build AI themselves. I think something we've been seeing for the past few months is that every single company in the world has to build their own AI models instead of outsourcing it to someone else. Otherwise, they run the risk of getting left behind. And so we think that some of these enterprise features, enterprise products are really empowering all companies to do that, right? It's not just OpenAI, Anthropic, Microsoft that can build AI now. It's really like every single company in the world.
Is it difficult? How do these open source and smaller companies that don't have as much funding, how can they go up against these big tech companies, right, that as you say, do have such high costs and are burning through cash? So if you're a smaller developer and you're on Hugging Face, how do you think these companies in your ecosystem that they're able to compete?
So I think the way we envision AI is that in the past few years, past 2 decades, the paradigm to build technology was software, right? So you would write 1 million lines of code, very, very rule-based. Now we're in a world where with AI, right? You start from the data, you train models, you optimize models, and that's how you build your features, your products, your workflow. And I think when it comes to competition or moats, the same rules apply between the two paradigms, right? So the same way in software, the way to compete was to build better software, faster software than your competitors, and progressively you build the moat. It's the same thing in AI, right? The way to compete for smaller companies, smaller organizations is to build AI better, faster than their competitors. And then progressively as they grow, they're going to get more usage, they're going to get more revenue, they're going to get more network effect that is going to create a moat for them. So in that sense, competition moats are not so different between the AI paradigm and the software paradigm, especially because what we're seeing now is with large pre-trained models that are made open by some players like Meta, it becomes really, really easy to fine-tune, optimize, merge. There are a bunch of different techniques that allows even smaller companies to build their own models based on a large pre-trained model like Llama 3, right? That's why we've been seeing 1 million models on the platform, right? It's not just 1 million model by big tech companies. It's every single organization, every single AI, indie AI builder, any single kind of like academia now able to build AI themselves using open source as a base to lower the barrier to entry.
Right. So there are a lot of benefits to open source like you're talking about, and it's become more popular even with some of the bigger players like Meta, or even closed source companies, right, like Google starting to release their own open source versions of their models. That being said, there's a lot of criticism of open source as well. So can you tell me a little bit about, what do you say to the criticism that open source can be dangerous? Is it the wild, wild west on Hugging Face? If someone wants to upload code that, let's say, could be really harmful, could help you come up with a novel bioweapon, is that something that Hugging Face would allow? What's your stance on that?
It's not the wild, wild west. It's not the wild west. It's most of the open source AI, similarly to the open source software, happens in platforms that are very responsible, like GitHub or Hugging Face, with safeguards that allow to mitigate the risks. a lot of the kind of like so-called risks of open source are actually also similar risk of proprietary. Like for example, bioweapons. It's really easy to use a proprietary API and to what we call like hijack the kind of like proprietary API and to get them to do exactly the same thing than open source. And at the end of the day, if you look at technology as a whole, the way to mitigate risks at scale is to do some sort of distribution of power instead of concentrating power in the hands of a few. Because what you do with open source is that you allow policymakers, you allow regulators, you allow law enforcement to actually understand, master, control this technology, and to make sure that they're used in alignment with the law and what we expect as a society. So now I think we're getting into a consensus that open source is not more dangerous than closed source, and even more like the opposite, that open source is a more sustainably long-term way to develop the technology safer.
I don't know if we're quite at consensus with some of the people in tech I talk to, but yes, I think there is growing support for open source. And just to be clear, so if I did try to upload, not that I have one, but an idea for a novel bioweapon, I would not be allowed to do that on Hugging Face, correct?
You have different safeguards. So we have like security scanners, for example. We have like community processes to be able to report things that are like against the terms of use or like illegal. And so you have many ways to make sure
my name
it
is
doesn't
Annika
create more
and
risks
I
than
am a
existing
robot.
systems. On bioweapons, the interesting thing is not to look at it in absolute terms, but to look at it compared to what's possible today. And there's been some studies and some research that has shown that AI models today are not actually building more capabilities to do that than regular Google search, where you can basically find the exact same information that you would find from an AI model. So it's all about kind of like balancing some of this risk, mitigating some of this risk, while at the same time kind of like benefiting the whole ecosystem and world.
Makes sense. And what do you say to kind of the economic argument, which is probably the second biggest criticism I hear of open source, that if American or Western companies let these models show all their code to the world and to everyone, that then economic or political rivals can sort of copy our code and take our prized AI kind of head start?
So if you look at country by country, open source in the US benefits more the US than other countries for some obvious reasons, like for example language, right? If you open source in the US, it's going to be in English. For norms, if you open source in the US, the norms around AI is going to be American-centric. For connection, relationship, right? You build up the capabilities of American residents, and so you actually help develop the ecosystem in the US more than in other countries. And so if you look at AI, not only at where we are today, but the speed of evolution, by open sourcing in the US, you make sure that the US keeps leading on AI, which is the most important thing. Versus if you stop open source in the US, and then other countries, obviously a lot of people are talking about China, are starting to open source, right? And progressively build up and catch up and start leading thanks to open source in their country, then the situation is much more dangerous. And actually, if you look at the leadership in the US for the past few years, in my opinion, it's been built by open source, right? If there wasn't kind of like attention is all you need, which is like the reference research paper for AI, if there wasn't BERT, if there wasn't stable diffusion, all these kind of like open source innovations, the US wouldn't be a leader in AI as it is today. So in my opinion, we need to keep doing that to keep leading and keep competing. Makes
sense. You made a lot of predictions toward the end of last year, November, about the year ahead. Some of them, I think, have already partially come true, specifically one that a hyped AI company would go bankrupt or get acquired for a ridiculously low price. directionally, I would say accurate, if not all the way happening. Because while Stability AI hasn't gone bankrupt, it's definitely gone through some changes, and we've also seen Inflection, right, another very buzzy AI company, be acquired in sort of all but name, or have a lot of its staff acquired, right? Do you think we'll see more of this, and why?
Yes, I think so. I think there's been a lot of what we could call kind of like cloud money laundering in a way, where like the big cloud providers have been investing a lot of money in a lot of startups, sometimes like sponsoring compute, especially for very large models, right? Where you end up in a place where you have like a very large model that is like very costly to train and to run, but because some of these startups have raised so much money, they can offer it at a fraction of the cost, right? Potentially selling, $1 of infrastructure of compute for 50 cents, right? For things that don't always make sense, like for example, if you look at banking customer chatbots, sometimes because of this phenomenon of kind of like cost sponsoring, you end up using like massive model, whereas you probably don't need to, because you probably don't need kind of like a banking customer chatbot to tell you about the meaning of life, right? You'd prefer use kind of like a smaller, more customized, more specialized model that is really good for your specific kind of like industry-specific domain, but you don't need it kind of like to be massive and tell you about everything in the world. So I think we might see some adjustments there. We're very early in the technology, so there are things that don't really make sense that are going to adjust progressively. I think more and more companies are going to start focusing on not only the revenue they're making, but the kind of revenue that they're making. Is it profitable? Is it not profitable? Is it sustainable? Is it not sustainable? I think it's going to be interesting to see that play out in the next few months.
I'm going to ask just a few more questions and then turn to the audience for some of their burning questions as well. I just want to, for a second, talk about how important evaluations are and what is a Hugging Face leaderboard. Why is it so important for people to be at the top of a Hugging Face leaderboard? I have had other startups tell me that as like a point of pride, that we're on the top of such and such Hugging Face leaderboard this month. Can you explain what that means and why it's important?
Yeah, this year it's been exciting to see Hugging Face become kind of like the most used platform for evaluation of models and AI in general. It's a very important part of the AI cycle because it's hard to understand which model, which data set is going to be good for your specific use case, your specific industry. We've seen, I think, over 5,000 leaderboards created on Hugging Face to evaluate models. And the way I see it is that every AI builder has to use a bunch of different things to be able to assess which model to use, which data set to use, how to train, etc. First, they have to use public leaderboards, right, and generalist leaderboards. We talk a lot about them. We have like the OpenLLM leaderboard on Hugging Face. There's like the chatbot arena built by the amazing team from out of Berkeley.
LIMSYS.
Yeah. Exactly. You have Helm from that is done by Stanford. So you have a lot of like really good public leaderboards that gives you a good first indication. Then you have to look at kind of like the social signals. You have to look on Hugging Face, like are the models liked? Is there a community that is using it, optimizing it? Is it supported by the community? And then you have to build your own evaluation because, as I said, like every company use case is going to be different. And so you want to evaluate these models based on your constraints. Like if I'm building a banking customer success chatbot, you need to have your evaluation for your specific customer expectations and see if it's working well. And then you have to evaluate the cost of these systems. Is it going to be cost effective? Is it going to be fast enough? Is it going to be scalable? and really kind of like ultimately build and evaluate your own models all the time to see how you can iterate on them. We're very early on the technology cycle, I think, in AI. It's very immature now, how you build AI, but progressively we're getting better at building best practices, just the way we've done it in software. It took maybe 10 years in software to get to best practices on how to build software. I think we're in AI where everyone is learning what's the best way to build AI.
Okay, great. All right, I'm going to turn to the audience questions. The first one, with Hugging Face focusing on profitability versus OpenAI on research/revenue and fundraising, how does Hugging Face not get left behind?
I think it's different approaches, but we're also very different companies, right? Very different businesses. We see the world very, very differently. We collaborate a lot. For example, they have very popular open source models on Hugging Face, like Whisper, which is like an audio model. And the AI kind of like domain and fields is so big that we don't really approach it as kind of like a competitive kind of like a market. I think just the same way you have a bunch of like trillion-dollar software companies, hopefully in the future you're gonna have a bunch of trillion-dollar AI companies. So there's a lot of room for like different approaches.
Makes sense. Let's see. Okay, how about this one is quite technical, but I'm sure you are capable to answer that. How do you ensure performance? We are seeing a lot of SLA issues with GPT-4. What kind of SLA guarantee do you provide for an enterprise offering?
It depends, right? It depends your use case, what you're using it for, what kind of model you're using it for. But enterprises are very happy with our Enterprise Hub offering. I don't want to be kind of like the salesman on that, but especially when you can use open source to run AI on your own infrastructure instead of kind of like relying on someone else's infrastructure, you can really kind of like align that with your specific constraints in terms of latency, in terms of kind of like availability of these services. So ultimately what we're seeing from enterprise is that most of them want to kind of like have their own AI, also for these reasons of kind of like being able to control the availability of these services, just the same way they control the availability of these services for their traditional software.
I liked, there was one, a fun one, because you are French. It said US versus France, which one will win the AI war, or is it both?
Yeah, both of them. I mean, like, I think, you know, we're like in a field where everyone can kind of like contribute in a different way. As you said, I'm French, but I migrated to the US now over 10 years ago. So I've seen kind of like the beauty of both countries and kind of like the strengths of both countries. So hopefully we can move toward a world where, you know, everyone can contribute to the field in a different way. It's even more important in large language models because obviously you have the language issue where you don't want a world where, you know, English gives everyone so many more capabilities than other languages, right? So you want to find a way, and open source is helping a lot with that, where like all countries, all languages have access to these technologies and can contribute to the building of these technologies.
Speaking of French, you've given a French title to your new robotics project. It's Le Robot, right? Can you tell us a little bit about what that is? Are you going to be building humanoid robots that we're starting to see become very popular? And
I am a robot, actually.
oh, okay. It's all simulation.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. I think what we're seeing is that AI is becoming the default paradigm for all technology, not just text, right? There's a lot of focus right now on text, on large language models, of course, but we're seeing a lot of traction for models in audio. right? Now you can generate like really good songs with AI, which is incredible. I don't know why people are not talking more about that. We're seeing a lot of usage in image, of course, like Stable Diffusion kind of like paved the way. We're seeing a lot of usage in video, in time series, right? When I got here, I took my Uber. The ETA on Uber is AI for time series. For multimodal, right? I have my Meta. It uses kind of like Llama 3, an open source model, to be able to detect objects and kind of like translate in real time thanks to image to text models. Biology, chemistry, and robotics, right? We're starting to see more and more interest there, especially because it's a domain that can have really high barriers to entry, just because obviously it's costly. And so what we're excited about is to help the open source have an impact in robotics, where you can include more people to build robotics models, to build robotics data sets, which are strongly lacking right now, and hopefully ultimately build open source hardware. Like I'm much more excited about a world where instead of having one company selling you these kind of like giant, kind of like black box robots, I'm more excited about a world where you could have like some small, cute, like open source robots that you understand perfectly how they're built, why they act like that, that you can almost kind of like program yourself right away to do some kind of like fun, useful things for you. So hopefully we're trying to push the world a little bit in that direction rather than the first direction.
Great. Well, before we wrap, any last predictions? It's your chance to modify or add to your list.
No, I mean, let me try to remember a little bit my predictions. I think I've been very lucky, because usually I really suck at predictions in AI, because it's like so difficult to predict the future. A lot of people ask us for predictions in 5 years, in 10 years. It's really impossible because things are moving so fast. But what we're going to see is that I think, like it usually happens with technology, we're probably going to overestimate the impact of this technology in the short term, right? So maybe we're going to be disappointed in a year and 2 years. We're going to be like, oh, why don't we have like humanoid robots doing everything for me? But we probably underestimated the long-term impact of AI. I think in 10 years, the world is going to be very, very different thanks to AI, and that's one of the reasons, obviously, I'm excited to work on the topic.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for joining us. Yeah.
Thank you.